Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iterade, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Miguel Iterade here for the Lights Out podcast, and I'm in the Lights Out vault, one-on-one with Onassis Parungao. Definitely a first-generation MMA person. Very happy to have you here. Onassis, how are you?
Hi, nice to meet you. Put a face to a name. Hello to everybody. Thanks for having me.
And Onassis is one of the participants in UFC 7, and he also participated in one of the Russian Absolutes, I believe the very first one. So we're going to go into some of that. But what are you doing right now? Where are you? Introduce your school and stuff like that, because we're looking at a lifelong martial artist, a guy who at about, I'm figuring about 20, 23, 25 years old, challenged himself and went in, fought in UFC.
Yeah.
He's undefeated in UFC. And now, he's been a lifelong martial artist. So introduce your school, sir.
Name of my school is Cheng Yi Kung Fu School. Cheng Yi is the characters for righteousness. Honestly, I was a fighter before I went into traditional, martial arts. I did Filipino martial arts, and a lot of Filipino martial arts doesn't do as much forms or anything like that. They just fight. Stick fight, hand fight, arnis de mano, all that stuff. So that's the kind of person I was first before I wanted to do the kung fu and stuff like that.
I got you.
And I teach in Connecticut now, but a big portion of my traditional learning was also in California. I moved back here because my dad was in the Navy and he retired, and yada yada yada. I had some kids, and those things are important to me and stuff. But I gotta say, always a fighter first.
Okay.
So,
and that's
right.
to be respected, because we met you at UFC 7, not personally, but the fight world met you at UFC 7. You fought as an alternate. You fought Francesco Maturi,
yes,
who's remembered as the guy who filed his teeth, and Art Davey
Fang.
gave him Art Davey gave him the nickname Fang,
Yeah.
and so that's where we met you. How did you get there? Tell us the story of how you got into UFC 7.
It was the early 90s, and they had a couple, few UFCs, and then they started saying, apply if you think you can do it, if you got the balls to try, and I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of other fighters did the same thing. I wrote a letter, saying, hey, I'm a Filipino martial artist. I also do some honga. I do some traditional kung fu. Let me in there, send them a little video of me training, hitting the bag and stuff like that. But you have to remember, and as I said before, you guys are the experts in all the history now. That was a bracketed tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And when they allowed the newbies, us, in there, behind them, we were alternates. They only paid us $5,000 to do that. I flew into Buffalo with my dad. It's always strange when you're flying into a new location, because like some guys are gym fighters, you know what I mean? Like if you're a fencer, you might be known as a Saul fencer, right? So if you know anything about fencing, you might be almost unbeatable in your own Saul, but when you go out and fence in somewhere strange, same thing, right?
Sure.
So when you get there, it's wintertime, it's cold, you're not used to the food, I mean, those are all things that professional fighters have to deal with, and I don't know how much detail you want me to go. I mean, like during that time, they make you do, blood testing, the AIDS testing, there's all kinds of shady guys that approach you in the beginning. Like I had this one camera guy approach me, this is for UFC 7 now, like saying, hey, I noticed you don't have too many guys in your corner. If you give me a backstage pass, I'll take a bunch of photos for you, and they'll be great. But afterward, he took all these photos, but then it just said, professional copy. Now you're gonna have to pay me for those. So I let that guy go down ringside. He took all his photos, and then he tries to charge me for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
And I had to, I had to learn all these lessons at the beginning, as a noob at that. There are guys that are like trying to like bet, put money, you know.
Sure.
So it depends on, I mean, how when we talk about Russia too, it depends on how deep, I want to go into the fighter's code and tell you about some of the stuff I know that go in there, like after the fight with Maturi, I was walking around the crowd, and I think, and by the way, Maturi's I have a lot of respect for him, a real nice guy. I think I heard he was a boxer, wrestler guy, I know he had done he's very physically fit, dude. He's bigger and heavier than me. I was the lightest guy in that tournament too, I think. I remember when we had the meeting for the fight, they were going to explain all the rules, which was not many. They had no biting, no eye gouging.
Right.
And that's about it.
Hair pulling, I think, by then.
Huh?
Hair pulling?
No, people were hair pulling.
Okay.
Head butting, no problem. Pulling, hitting in the crotch. They're doing all that stuff. The thing is like when we went to the meeting, I was trying to get in there, and some of the other guys were like saying, fighters only. And I'm like, I am a fighter. Oh, excuse me, right? And so I get up to the front of the table a little bit, and then people are like, fighters only. And I'm like, okay, I am a fighter. You just let me get to the table. I just want to grab my little card, and then I'm going to go sit down, and then they're going to explain to us, what we're going to do, because they try to get you there at least 2 or 3 days before so you can acclimate, which is, what professional fighters do.
Yeah. Who ran the rule meeting? Was it Art Davey running it, or by then was it Big John, or how did that work?
McCarthy was there, the referee, but I had it was on top of my head. I was going to say, it's a real nice guy. Big John McCarthy was there, but the wrestling Olympian.
Oh, Jeff Blatnick. Jeff
Blatnick was there, and a bunch of guys like him. But I forgot. My referee was from the Dragon. He's the really cool black guy. He's a martial artist.
Okay.
I can't think of his name right now. I feel. Anyway, yes, all those characters were there.
Okay. Was there any controversy? Now that was the first time we saw Marco Ruas in the tournament.
Yeah, with the whole foot stomping thing.
Yeah.
That was the first time we saw that,
Yeah. Now, well, let's talk about your fight first before we get into some of the other stuff there. Because I remember watching it back in the 90s, and I thought, like you said, you were the smaller guy in the fight. You were an alternate, so we might or might not see you again. But after your fight, I wanted to see you again because I thought that you had an impressive performance. You did fight a bigger guy, and you use more than kung fu techniques. And talk a little bit about the fight and how you were pretty prepared for a UFC style fight for that era.
I thought so, but obviously in hindsight, if anybody thinks I'm the same guy that I was 25 years ago, they're completely mistaken. I mean, obviously, anybody looks back at how they were more than 2 decades ago and go, holy crap, I could completely, crush who I was back then, But yeah, I remember the famous announcer, the Let's Get Ready to Rumble guy.
Michael Buffer.
Michael Buffer announced this, and even though as an alternate, and I was a little nervous, but I remember because I was on a state championship wrestling team, so I'm kind of, used to getting ready for, a match or whatever. But I'm sitting there looking at my opponent, and I'm like, I don't want to be nervous. So I started looking at his watch, and I'm going, man, he has a nice watch. And he didn't take my mind off what was about to happen, literally, 90 seconds right after that, and then it was ding, and Fang rushed at me or whatever. And I just instinctively, I threw a front kick, and I was hoping that he would spit blood. He's a nice guy. I like him all, but obviously a bigger guy, all he did was just shake it off and said, come on, and then, after that, that's general martial arts. After that, I used, very Filipino martial arts, which is a cross back fist.
Okay.
And that's a short-handed method, you know what I mean? So you miss with a cross and you come back with a back fist. And then I use the traditional left punch. And everyone's always getting on me about that fight, that they think I was trying to claw him in the eyes. I wasn't. If you see the video, I put out a YouTube video of the fight. You may have seen it. It's a tiger claw, but I pull the fingers back, so it was all palm in the face. It was not me, trying to get him in the eyes or anything like that. I know what the rules are, so that's not what happened. Then when I got down on the ground, the fight went longer, went a few minutes. The thing that was really delaying me is he had a lot of grease in his hair. I was like, my hands were really slippery, and I was doing all I could just to stay in control on the top, and they were trying to. Don the Dragon Wilson was saying, you expect to strike from the ground, and I'm like, yeah, it's possible. You can, they didn't even come up with the term ground and pound yet. I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, people were doing it already. I wasn't the first, but I was like, hell yeah, other guys are doing it. Why can't I do it too? So I struggled to find a few, to connect a few hits, and I did. And then he finally, tapped. And like I said, cool guy though. I talked to him afterward, Yeah,
no, that's good. And he was also, more or less from the same cloth. Art Davey told us in his interview that he received a letter from Fang Maturi, and that he had received hundreds of letters from hundreds of, martial artists applying for it and stuff. So it's interesting how his matchmaking process, met up a big guy versus a little guy. He's doing his work.
Yeah.
Wide representation. Go ahead.
Don the Dragon Wilson came up to me afterward, and he said, you made me lose a lot of money.
Oh,
I'm like, why? Because I bet against you. And I'm like, well, good. I hope you lost a lot. I'm like, what kind of, fucked up shit is that? Excuse my language. I'm like, why would you say that to me? You know what I mean? Of course I gotta, good. Eat it, man. I'm not saying that he sucks, okay? I'm not saying that, I'm gonna kick his ass or not. I'm just saying, you bet against me. Of course I'm gonna try to make you lose,
No, that makes sense. And that's funny because you felt like, they didn't let you in the room, and then Don Wilson's betting against you. Did you feel like overall disrespect from them yet?
A little bit. Yeah.
Is that one of the reasons? Like you won, now you're watching. Let's stay there, but then I'll ask you why you never came back. But so now you won the fight. Now you expect to jump in the tournament if it's needed at some point.
Yes.
Now, did you scout? Did you watch the other fights?
Yeah, I mean, they gave us a little TV monitor, like in the workout room, like off to the side where we were limbering up, but it wasn't fancy like it is now,
Sure.
I gotta say something about it. It could be because I was adamant in the beginning that they wanted to sign me to minimum number of fights contract. And I don't know about the other guys. I got paid 5 because I just said, I want the one fight because I want to see how your organization works.
Okay.
You will not bind me, be committed. I didn't want to be tied down,
Okay.
Because I've heard horror stories about other guys, in other arts and professions, and how they get treated in contracts and stuff like that. So I always when we talk about Russia, same thing. They wanted me to be in a multi-fight deal. We're talking about going to Kazakhstan and going to all these different places. They would have had me all over the world, man. I probably would have Kazakhstan. I would have ended up upside down hanging by my feet, for breaking the law, doing something, you know what I mean?
Not to mention, especially back then, it was dangerous, man. I mean, now it's probably dangerous, but back then it was war zone, with Russia and stuff. So it's frightening.
Yes. When I did UFC 7, you're not going to believe, no one believes me when I say this, but that was 2 days before my wedding.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I remember my mother-in-law saying, don't get your face mocked up. You know what I mean? I'm like,
yeah, sure.
I'm like, okay, you're going to ruin the wedding if you get all jacked up. I'm like, okay.
Well, so we could definitely tell a good story about you. You flew in, you really didn't get marked up. You went home, $5,000. Hey, that's not bad for a wedding tip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially back then. So that's a good story.
Well, Yeah, afterward is where I really got approached, because there was this guy named Takate Otate. Damn it, I can't pronounce his name. I apologize to all the Japanese speakers. Okay,
No,
yeah,
it's all good.
but he approached me about doing the shoot fighting stuff in Japan.
Okay.
You know, and I was thinking about doing that. The thing is, I just got married, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard about other fighters going to Japan, and you know, being separated and going to Japan for like a year. I just got married, didn't even go on a honeymoon, you know, and he's asking me to go.
Okay.
You know, fighters will get together in like bathhouses and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, then they might meet together at other places. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just got married. You can't put me in those situations. You know?
Yeah. No, I understand.
I'm not saying I'm going to do anything, but it's just like when we went to Russia. I can tell you some stuff about, you know, when we get to that point. You know, I'll tell you about that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand.
Well,
So that is a tough decision. You know,
when we were in Russia and they pulled us apart, like on a separate day, they took us out to a nightclub and offered us prostitutes.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that might be commonplace in other places, but me as a Navy kid growing up, you know, and my dad is always like, you know, yes, sir, you know, and my dad with me, you know.
Yeah.
My dad's like, and I'm like, oh no, you know, I'm not. I did not partake of the offerings. You know what I mean?
No, I understand. No, they. I think it's a deliberate. You know, I think they do it in Brazil as well. Is they will try to deliberately distract you for one way or another. You know.
Yeah.
So we'll get to Russia in a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about your scouting for UFC 7. What do you remember about, you know, some of the legends from that show, like Marco Ruas? Like, who impressed you, and what were your memories from watching the tournament?
No one knew jack shit hardly about anybody, except everybody had eyes on Royce Gracie, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, let's be honest. Yes, there were guys who were the karate guys coming in, there were the judo guys coming in, you know, there were a bunch of, but it was the Wild West. Think about it. No weight classes, right?
Sure.
People just haven't really got training routines down, like, and make no mistake, I might say this multiple times during this interview. So obviously respect to all the MMA fighters out there, but modern MMA fighters currently, as they are right now, in my opinion, are the best, you know, especially the good professionals, are the best trained, the best athletes. They belong where they are. All their accolades go to them because they fight and they train hard. And I wouldn't put it past them, you know, to whip anybody and everybody, you know. That being said, there is holes in what's going on, right? So what I mean by that is, you know, a long time ago, like let's say you're a Japanese swordsman, right? And you're really good, right? And you do a duel, right? And you only have a couple methodologies, you know. There's a lot with sword, right? You don't always just brashly attack, right? You can feint, you can attack by draw, you can do all these things, right? But if your opponent doesn't survive, he doesn't learn from his mistake. Right. What modern MMA also brought to the table was recording everything. And people learned what was doable, what was not. And it was a great awakening. It is a great awakening, you know?
Absolutely.
You know, and so when a guy has a great methodology, you know, I remember when we were wrestling, you know, there was a guy who was a state champ, you know, who just could put everybody in a head and arm. Everybody knew it was coming, right? And then the guy would try it 5 or 6 times, and he might not be able to land it. And all of a sudden, in the second round, he cranks that sucker on tight, boom, pins a guy, you know. Yeah. And the same move is coming, right? But if you're unable to learn, if nobody knew what that guy's methodology was, right? Every single opponent is starting off kind of not really knowing what's going on. That's why MMA fighters are getting so much better, in my opinion, is because they've learned, oh, what are the weaknesses? What are the trappings of this, right? And that's why I keep saying, you know, they're the best at what they do. That being said, you know, you fight the way you do in a ring, naked with a Speedo if you had to. I wouldn't do that. You know, I'd want at least a rash shirt, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Some shorts. But some of them guys, you know, the Brazilian guys go naked with a Speedo because they can. I mean, if you're on the back of a parking lot or railroad tracks, you're not going to go, all right, hold on, let me get naked down to a Speedo and then fight that way. You know what I mean? And me being as a wrestler, I'm not inclined to want to shoot on somebody if I'm naked. You know what I mean? I mean, I'll do it if I have to, but I don't want to get all cut up on glass or whatever, right? And so being on your feet, in my opinion, MMA really came full circle, right? When the first guys came out, the jiu-jitsu guys came out, and they dominated a bunch of stand-up guys because obviously they weren't ready for it. Then when everybody started figuring out their game, the striking game started coming back full circle. Do you notice that? And a lot of guys two guys who are both really competent at everything will go, well, hey, you try to take me down, you're going to burn a lot of energy. I'll just counter you. I'll try to take you down. We'll just do it. So you know what? We're just going to stand up and box each other. And you see it happen a lot, you know? Yeah. It isn't that they can't grapple. It isn't that they won't grapple. It's just that you burn more energy when you grapple than when you punch or when you strike. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, it's easier. The other guy might be superior, but you still might have a chance at a stalemate at that takedown game, you know?
That's right. That's exactly right. And he might be better than you and everything. And then you could stalemate him just a little bit and create one little weakness and then pop, you know?
I'm not going to get it correct, but the Gracies mentioned, they have a story where they talk about, you know, bullfighting. And they said, you know, what if the other bulls sat in the front row and we're learning, you know?
Yeah.
If the bull might come out and you're out there and the bull might just sit down, you know? Yeah. So you burn energy. I'm not doing anything, but they don't learn, you know, it's exactly your point. So, perfect. But you see some advancement. Ruas is a pretty sophisticated fighter. And I imagine that some of the Japanese connection, you had Ken Shamrock there. He fought Oleg. You know, you're seeing guys that are already at a certain level of pro here for your first time. Did anybody jump out at you, or were you ready to fight any one of those guys? Were you worried? Was there somebody in particular that worried you more, or did you have that youthful confidence?
The only guys that really bugged me, obviously, because I never really prepared for, were the extremely large guys. Okay. You know, I mean,
Varelans was in there.
Paul Varelans, I met him afterward when I moved to California. He actually came to the Kung Fu school I was teaching at. My Sifu was Sifu Kung Wing Lam, right? And I was one of the head instructors there, Southern Hung Ga instructor there. Paul Varelans was in the San Jose area. And he came to the school and he's like, I'd like to train you at your school or whatever, but I don't really want to do what you guys do. I just want to use all your bags and your training equipment. And he's like, oh, I remember you. Hey, why don't you just like attack me and we'll do stuff like that. And I'm like, so you want me to just like attack you and you're going to train, you know, like it never worked. It didn't pan out, you know, he didn't do it, you know what I mean? But I heard he, you know, unfortunately passed away.
Yeah. He passed away from COVID last year. It's unfortunate, but so he was,
but he's a big guy.
Yeah. He was 350 that, you know, in that tournament. So he worried you. Now, what else did you see in that? Remco was the judo guy, and he'd had some UFC experience. How many of the UFCs had you actually watched before that?
The one that I can't remember his name, but there was this black guy. It was a judo guy, man. He had got a guy all splayed out, and then he had just was cranking down elbows on that guy. I don't remember what it was. That, you know, that guy was.
That's Gary really Goodrich. Good.
Yeah. That guy was really good. You know, I was like, man, don't get wishboned by that guy.
Yeah.
You know? I had learned from wrestling, you know, that any guy that comes out, we used to call guys that came out, you know, don't fall for Gumby, you know, because the guy might look like Gumby when he comes out, and then all of a sudden he kicks ass and he knows how to fight. So I just had respect for everybody. I actually said that, you know, in my little interview prior to, you know, I'm not here to be, you know, antagonistic. I just come here to fight. all I really cared about was back then was just fighting on guts, and I just wanted to do it. You know, I wasn't really, like I said, it was the Wild West. I didn't really have professional trainers the way guys have now. You know, I was training the way I did. You know, in my area, there's a lot of Taekwondo guys, there's a lot of karate guys. You know, a lot of guys doing back then. I remember the 70s, 80s doing point fighting and stuff like that. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So
what was your dad's experience like? Was he also like a martial artist? Or?
Yes, but my dad's a Filipino martial artist. My dad's retired Navy, and he's the type of guy that fights with knives.
Okay, I got you.
I'm deadly serious. I was in my judo class, right? And my sensei found out that he knew about knives and stuff, and he thought he was going to bring in some like blunt aluminum knives or plastic knives or, you know, any of them working knives. My dad brought in a bunch of butcher knives that were like deadly sharp, and he just said, anybody want to, you know, demo with me? And, you know, some of the black belts there, and they're like, and he's like, go ahead, attack me, you know. And then my dad's like, you know, wham, you know, and he would dump them, you know, or he hit them, and they're like, you need to calm down. This is only a demo. And my dad's like, I'm telling you to attack me, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So good. That's
so he's that type of person, you know what I mean? He doesn't, you know. But first lesson, when I was a kid, you know, you want to learn martial arts, he just grabbed me and threw me into the bar stools. Like we had these. My parents moved from Spain to America. We had all like this old type like European furniture, you know, with a lot of sharp edges. And my dad just threw me into that, and I was broken in there. And he's like, you still want to learn? Because that's what you have to go through, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, but, you know, let me rest up a little bit.
Very interesting. So now at the end of the day, Ruas won that tournament, and you go down in history undefeated in the UFC, 1-0. Why, you know, where was they had to approach you at some point, say, come back, even if it was just a conversation. And then what did you see in the organization? Because you said you were keeping an eye out for him that made you say, maybe not right now. Go ahead.
I have no proof of this, but I heard rumblings about Art Davies.
Okay.
You know, I don't know if he was a good guy or a bad guy. I heard rumblings that, you know, the Gracies were actually in charge of everything, you know, that they had it in their mind. You know, it's not me saying this. The rumors were out there that, you know, that they smartly put all their ducks in a row, you know. And obviously they're great martial artists. And what they did was they arranged it. The rumors was they arranged it so that they could win the first X number of ones, but by then they were so entrenched, you know, by the time everybody caught up to them, it was too late, that they were so good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. And I'll give you a good example of that that's public, but people do question it. And that's what I think leads you down that rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
The fact is for the first UFC, they had Brazilian referees. And they said, oh, you know, let's change that. It doesn't look good. Yeah. And they brought in a student from the Gracie Academy in California to be the referee, Big John McCarthy. You know, now John's a good man, and you know he's established himself as a ref. But it looks like what it looks like. It's a blue belt student coming in to be the ref, so that they have an American. No one realizes they still have hooks in them.
Well, the good thing about them though is, and what I wanted to do. I'll tell you what I didn't like. Not about them, but like if ever I went to a karate tournament, especially where they did, you know, points or anything like that, there was always some question as to whether you hurt a guy or whether you could knock out a guy. And so some of the judges might take points away from you, and, you know, for being overly aggressive. Are you kidding me? How many guys have stories about that where they got DQ'd for being aggressive, whatever? And that's bullshit. So you go to UFC, there's no doubt, right? If the guy taps, whether it's from you know, submission or for strikes, you won. So that was one thing that really appealed to me about that. The only reason I didn't, because they asked me, you know, to go further, is because I didn't want to get hooked in the contract.
Yeah. Okay.
And also I had plans to go study with my seafood in California. I had a whole plan thing. Like I thought, okay, I'll do this one thing and then I'll see how it goes. And then after I'd moved to California to be there permanently, that's when I got approached to get ready for the Russian Absolute
Okay, and let's go ahead and get into that then, because
Mhm.
the bottom line is there wasn't all that much time between them, if I'm not mistaken here. Let me just pull up my data here.
Less than a year, I think.
Yeah. So you got UFC 7, and UFC 7 was September 8th of 1995, and the Russian Absolute was about 3 months later, end of November.
Something like that, yeah.
So
I got to show you this. I still have this sweatshirt that they gave me. This is the sweatshirt from the tournament.
Oh, sweet.
Still got one here.
Cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate that a great deal. I gotta make it mandatory for the fighters to bring memorabilia or whatever they have. That, because that's the coolest thing, is I don't have much. I got a couple little trinkets here, but that is fascinating. I bet that's still one of the few ones that exist now,
Yeah, I got this poster that I'm not really looking to make a lot of money for it. I mean, I would probably just email it to a fan or you if you really wanted it, but it's a full poster from the tournament. I don't really need it.
Is that from the Russian Absolute?
It has the logo down here at the bottom, and then it has a calendar for the year 1996. So it was like something that they were, giving away, or something like that.
Oh wow, definitely. That's
give me your address. I'll send it to you if you want it.
I'm in Costa Rica, but
all right.
We'll definitely talk offline about it, and hopefully,
okay.
I'm sure somebody will be interested. Hopefully, you get at least a little bit of creditors, some love for that, because that's really sweet. So, all right, so you go to California now. So the Russian presence wasn't at the UFC. I thought that they may have been scouting you out there, or you met them in California. How does that transpire that you get to fly to Russia?
I would have to go back to my old notes, and I don't want to leave the interview right now. I was thinking whether I should run down in the basement. It's been down there for 20 years, but I have an old photo album, of everything, and I was looking for it. I know it's down there, but I didn't want to miss the Zoom, deadline.
It's cool.
But here's the guy I need to really tell you about. One of Russia's most celebrated martial artists that I'm pretty sure, unless they were joshing me, his name is David Rudman. David Rudman is a Russian Jew.
Okay.
Who is one of the fathers of Sambo. Are you familiar with Sambo?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Now, one of his students from New York contacted me way over when I was in San Francisco Bay Area. I was actually in a place called Sunnyvale, which is South Bay. And said, hey, do you want to do this? And I thought about it, and I'm like, well, when's the only other chance I'm going to ever get to Moscow, And I'm like, okay, I'll do it, but you got to take my dad, because my dad always comes with me. That's why he's in the video. So, but I didn't know this guy was just a character. This guy, I hate to say it, but he's more of a business schmooze guy, but he's also a martial artist, and he's a student, David Rudman.
Okay.
And he's the one that set all that up.
Okay.
And so they fly me back out to the East Coast, and then I meet up with a bunch of other guys at the airport at Kennedy, JFK, and then we go out. Trey Telegman and this other guy and there's a couple other guys.
Yep.
I can send you some pictures later when I find that album. Just in case you want to see what. Because we were there. Red Square. Temple of St. Basizi. All that. We got to see all that stuff. And I can tell you stories about it was interesting when you said the mafia, right? Because they had a presence there.
Yeah. Oh no, I know for sure.
It depends on how much detail you want me to go.
Well, I'll tell you. I'd like to go through this tournament, your experience, like we did, a little bit. But to tell you one story I heard not at this tournament, but one of the Absolute tournaments that. The referee was in the ring. He had the two fighters. He selected the winner. Then a guy in the front row got out and took his gun out. And the referee actually literally did one of these. So not where you were there, but that they were a presence there. Yes. I also did a few shows there. And my boss, they put out, there's a VIP section. Russians are big on ostentatiousness, right? Mm-hmm. So they have tables and stuff. And I was like, what do you, I usually, don't you give him champagne or like something there? He goes, No. These are the rich people in Russia are the rudest people. They will throw anything you give them, so I'm not giving them anything. That's a little bit of an idea of
Right.
my experience there, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
even more exposed to them, before being on the world stage. So let's go. Let's get into this.
Okay. All right. What do you want to know next? Otherwise, I'll just keep blabbing away.
Well, so you're heading to Moscow. You come in. They pick you up at the airport. It's a bus. They're probably taking good care of you. Won't describe the hotel and stuff.
We went to. This is 1995. We went to a hotel in Moscow.
Okay.
It looked like slightly renovated, but still 1940s or whatever. Pre-war hotel. The room, the first day we were there, one of the other American fighters, I apologize, I can't remember all their names, but Trey Telegman was one of the guys. They had a room right next to me and my dad. First thing I did was either I found a secret spot in a ceiling somewhere to hide any important documents like a passport or any extra money I had, or I always carried it with me. And, yeah, I spread stuff around, and the very first day we were there, that room next to ours got broken into, and the guy had a bunch of jeans in America, because you remember the way the economy was in 95. I mean, he got all his clothes stolen.
Wow.
And he said, is there any chance of me getting any of this stuff back? And they were like, I'm sorry, when those jeans hit the street, they were sold probably already, within.
Yeah.
Markets were bare, cupboards were bare, it was a different time, in 95. The $100 bill for the United States had just come out, and it didn't look real. It had weird markings on it. When you compare it to the old school $100 bill, it looked fake, right?
Right.
And every day that we were there 3 or 4 days prior to, they would, I don't want to call them mafia because I don't want them to come after me. I'll just say, eccentric guys with trench coats would, in the morning, they would feed us what they thought we'd want to eat. And the other guys are complaining, like, I'm getting weak here. I want protein. Can we have like chicken leg, chicken quarter, thighs, breasts, whatever, and they'd come up with these little, our chickens here in the US, what I mean? And they're super pumped up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they came up with these little, they look like these little birds, and they're like, I can't get enough protein. I remember the other fighters I was like, I'm just happy to be in Moscow, man. I'll eat whatever. I don't care. You know what I mean? But they would plop down $100 bill every day. And then I looked at him, right? And I was like, it's my father right here. I can't believe I did that to these guys too, because these dudes had, guns, man, And they were like, okay, and then they just put one in front of my dad. So every day, my dad's getting a $100 bill. He's not even a fighter,
Yeah.
And he'd go down to the hotel lobby, and every day, because he likes to, he's a Navy guy. He travel. He's well traveled. He'd go get coffee from the same lady, and the same lady all 4 days plus tournament day, charge him different prices for coffee, for goods every single day. And he's like, I thought it was, this many rubles, yesterday. Now it's this many. Like, what's going on, Yeah. But real quick, they let us go shopping one day, and we had two guys following us with the trench coats, and they have some kind of flea market bazaar. This is not obviously in Temple, not obviously in Red Square. It's outside somewhere, because they had shown us like the World War II subway that was converted over to a mall. They showed us where the generals were hiding during the attack, in Moscow and stuff like that. They gave us some like standard tourist thing. Then they took us to some like flea market thing. And my dad was looking at these Russian babushka hats that were real big. And this is the last, I don't want to bore everybody, but the way people barter when there's a language barrier is the same as when I went to China. Okay. You write down a number and then they slide it to you, right? Like they want 100, for example, right? And then I'm like, Dad, the guy's trying to barter with you. And he's like, oh no. He cuts it in half, you know what I mean? And says, 50, right? And he wants this mink looking babushka hat. You know what I'm talking about? The traditional ones like that, fur. And the guy was like, oh, and it was the equivalent of, you're taking money out of our mouths, you know what I mean? And my dad's like, oh, that's too bad. I don't want to spend that much money, you know? And then the mafia guy looks at him, right? And the guy got scared. The guy literally went, he just bowed down like this. And then he said, okay, you can have it for this price. And then my dad goes, well, if that's the price, I'll take 2.
Oh, man.
And the guy was like, oh, shit. You know, and he took the 2 nicest ones he had, you know. That's just the way life is, man, for them, I guess, you know.
Yeah. I'll you know, we're telling stories. We'll probably edit some of this, but we were in Russia. We took a bus full of fighters. I got into the bus, and the boss guy got into his Mercedes up front. Yeah. We're following them to the nightclub after the fights, and the boss whips a U-turn and keeps going. The bus follows him in the U-turn. We get stopped by cops. So the cop is here, and they're beginning to show paperwork, and he's trying to explain. And you can see my boss's Mercedes make another U-turn. He comes back, he makes another U-turn, parks right behind the police car, gets out of his car, and gets into the backseat of the police car to explain to the other guy who he is. The other guy gets out of his car, comes over, and they let us go. That's all it was. He whipped U-turns. We got stopped. He didn't, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, no. I just had to tell him who I was.
That is, in my opinion, 100% accurate, because David Rudman, okay, the martial artist, he's famous for his sambo, but he was also really famous for judo, and you know, I think he learned Krav Maga as well, because, you know, he's Russian Jew. Mm-hmm. He's a huge name there. There are 7 gigantic gymnasiums in Moscow that are not only schools academically for kids, but sambo schools. Mm-hmm. And it's genius what he did. He put them next to the tenement buildings. All those kids, a few generations that were attending those schools, are all his students. So he basically has like an empire. Yeah. He was leading the car that was in front of us, and we were the next car after. And I don't know if it's equivalent. We were at a 4-way intersection. I don't know if it's equivalent of like the mayor of Moscow. I don't know who he was. It's some important guy, right? And he was trying to cross, and we were going this way straight. And the cop that was at the intersection saw our parade coming down, right? And instead of just doing all this and directing, he saw David Rudman's car, and he stopped all the traffic, made everybody stop. And I'm just going to stand up. He stood up, and then he went like this, and he just bowed like this, right? And David Rudman's car and our car went past, right? And I don't know who this guy was, but he followed us to the gymnasium. And he said, who do you think you are? And the only reason I know this is that the interpreter, because we're like, what's going on? And we're like, oh, this guy is complaining, you know, why did you make my car stop? Do you know who I am? And David Rudman and all his like guys with the trench coat guys, you know, mm-hmm. They give him a little talking to, and they're like, I don't know who you think you're talking to, but mm-hmm. I highly suggest that you go back in your car. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there was like a little delay, a little pause, and that dude just backed up and went right back to his car. You know what I mean? Like he didn't want to mess with this, whoever these guys were. And I'll leave it at that, man. That was some Sopranos kind of stuff going on, you know? Yeah, and they backed off.
Now, how was where was the show? Like, what was the building?
I have some huge mecca, you know.
It was like a hockey arena, though, or
yeah, it was something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know where I was half the time. You know, those guys just taking me wherever they want. You know, they bring the bodyguard with you, and then that's it.
Sure. No, I've heard also like Oleg Taktarov talk about fights in a circus tent, but this was like a legitimate building.
This was the event. It's a 2-day event too.
Okay.
See, what people don't realize about bracketed events is you may have to fight 3-4 times in a night. It's just like when you're in wrestling and you're at a quad meet, you know, you're going to fight. I mean, you're going to wrestle, you know, 4 or 5 opponents to get to the, you know, to your final match, you know?
Yep. So, you know, another time that I was in Russia, they divided obviously the Russian team, and then you guys are the foreign team in the locker rooms. Is that how that was?
Yes, it was Americans, and then it was Renzo, and then it was Marco Ruas who won the whole thing. And then there was another. Another guy.
Ricardo Morais.
Oh, Ricardo Morais. I'm sorry.
No.
That was on my brain because you said that. Ricardo Morais, yes.
Yeah, and I got a little bit more help for you. One of the other Americans is Alex Andrade, who was
That's him, yes.
at the point, but yeah.
Yes, he's from Texas.
Yeah,
I do believe, yes.
He was with Telligman, but
yeah.
So that gives us a couple of guys from there. But now you're facing Sambo, which, you know, for people from the West may not recognize it, but Sambo is an old martial art in terms of, you know, by the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was very sophisticated with very advanced guys, very rugged with the whole Russian and the Russian culture of, like, you know, Georgians and Kazakhstanis and people from all kinds of. So you're talking about a brutal sport.
Excellent.
And you're facing some of these guys there. What was that like? Did you have time to see them, to roll around? Did you get any preview? Talk about that.
David Rudman brought us to his gymnasium, and with spy cameras, cameras in another office that was overlooking the mats. Just let us work out. You know, I didn't know. You know, we're so young then, you know.
Yeah.
Basically, what he did was, let's get these foreigners who we brought over, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, they want the Russians to win, right? But let's get these foreigners here and let's get them work out, and let's let them roll around and see what kind of skills they have. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And then we can pick them apart and, you know, put the matches together the way we want to. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what I guess was happening. Because what I learned later on is, he actually told me, he goes, "Oh, I saw you working on this, or I saw you doing that. That's excellent, whatever." And I'm like, "How? You weren't there?" And he's like, "I was watching you from the office."
Yeah. I fully expect that kind of treatment from the Russians. So,
he was never a mean guy, though. In fact, he let me wear his personal pair of shoes in the tournament, because kicking was not allowed with shoes unless you had these special Sambo shoes that were basically a soft leather.
Okay.
Then they would allow you to kick if you wanted to.
Got you. Nice. Okay. Now, and you didn't get to see any of the Sambo guys. Like, it's not like they said, "Hey, now it's your turn. Here's your opponent. Check out his video." None of that. No, obviously.
No, that's what I was alluding to earlier. All the modern fighters now, they get to do, just like in boxing, professional boxing, you know, you get to watch your fighter's previous matches, and you get to see what his tendencies are. Oh, you know, they're like boxing, you know, he drops his hand after he jabs, you know what I mean? He's a sucker for the left hook. I'll wait till the third round, and then I'll bring it out, you know what I mean? And I'll do, you know, professionals do all that shit, you know? None of that was going on in the early days. You know, it was the Wild West, you know? And that's why I found it, not to say I wish for the old days as much, but it was so much more exciting, because when the crowd got to view, like, these two strange styles just ripped apart and just put in the same ring, you know, people were just like, "What the hell are we watching?"
Yeah.
It was the Wild West, you know. Now it's, you know, everybody, you know, boxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know, Muay Thai, you know, they're all well versed in all that, which is great and all.
Yeah. No, they're more advanced martial artists, but there is sort of like an edge taken on. And I won't say more advanced mixed martial artists, but there's an edge taken away from it. Like, I used to hear Ken Shamrock talk about an argument, and Ken firmly believed that it was not a sport, that it's crossed over to spectacle. The old idea of nobody ever left the fist fight to go watch the band play. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah, it's very edgy. I think in Russia, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is I think here we're probably one of the edgiest events I ever saw in my life, because there were many mismatches. There were some very highly skilled guys among the Russians. Ilyukhin is a superstar, the guy who fought in the finals. To me, he was older by then, but he was a guy with rings experience, and I know a lot about him. Maxim Tirasov was also a good fighter. And then there were guys, Igor Vovchanchin, and then there were guys that, you know, looked like they just got out of, I don't know, a 1950s film with like red shorts and striped shirts and stuff. What was your experience? You fought Pavel Bishev in the first round. Describe him and describe that fight.
I had heard that he was, you know, possibly, you know, taekwondo and sambo or something like everybody, a lot of those guys could do sambo, obviously, but I guess he could kick too. So the thing is, also, I'm not making excuses, but we didn't wear any gloves.
Sure.
There was no gloves, and we weren't taping our hands, or not, at least I wasn't. One of the early punches when I threw him, his mouth was up, because I had hit him a couple of times first, and then I popped him once, and I remember his mouth, when I hit him, his mouth would open like this, and when I hit him again, his teeth would, like, they jabbed right into my right knuckles, you know what I mean? Just like that. And I remember, like, pulling my hand away going, fuck, you know what I mean? Like, that's my best hand, I wasn't making any excuses after that. I mean, fight is fight, but it was just on my mind after that. I was a nervous ball of energy, I'm in a strange place. I'm in a strange country. I'm not used to the food, honestly. I'm not used to people around me,
Yeah, you're uncomfortable.
Yes, I have no other way to describe it other than that, and afterward, you realize, just like in wrestling, you realize, oh man, I could have done so much better. Why didn't I do this? We didn't really do much ground that I could think of, and the ref stopped it, just from punching.
Mm-hmm.
You
got him about.
It's not flamboyant. Fighting, is not that flamboyant. There were no high kicks. There was nothing like that. You know what I mean? Anybody that says, oh, why didn't you do Kung Fu? I'm like, Kung Fu means hard work. So if the hard work is just beating the other guy's ass, then I did Kung Fu, you know what I mean? So I don't care what it looks like, as long as you get the win, you know what I mean?
No, and in the tournament format, you have to be thinking about conserving energy and about all that sort of stuff.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, that was the other thing that was on my, that was what I was trying to get to. You said it more concisely, but yes.
So now, Bishop, you get by the first round. Now you beat a Russian. Now you got to have, a little bit of confidence building up and stuff.
Yeah, and why did they put me against Ricardo, right? It's like, oh, we want to, let's get rid of him in the brackets, whatever, right? It should have been, and I'm not complaining, but I'm like, why couldn't I fought a couple more Russian dudes and work my way up a little bit more? I would have got more money, at that point, right? Because every time you win, you're getting a certain level more income. That's how they did it.
Okay.
Right? So first round, you get this much. Second round, you get that much until you get to the end, right? And I was thinking, why put all the Americans, why pitch us like that? Why not, like spread us out? You know what I mean? Do more entertaining. Yeah. But they were setting it up for that one guy and Ricardo, And we'll talk about that after. Go ahead. Whatever you're going to say.
Okay. No. You got Ricardo Morais, who, for references, a Renzo Gracie student. The guy is, probably a full over 2 meters tall, 6'5", 6'6", at least.
He's a giant, man. Compared to me, I was a little intimidated. The thing is, the way it ended,
and not shy about the steroids, Ricardo Morais too. Ripped and huge.
I don't care about that.
Okay.
We were in a position where he was on top, right? He was throwing knees, but his knees weren't really hurting me at all. He was hitting me with the middle of his thigh, right? If you watch the fight, the thing is, I know how to get out of that. I could have sat out and I could have rolled around, but just prior to that, I was watching his punches because Alex had fought him before me.
Okay.
And Alex was saying the size of his fist was like a foot. You know what I mean? It's like, looked like a foot coming at you. You know what I mean? And Alex's eye was all jacked up and he got punched to crap out of. And I kept thinking, sucks for him. He didn't get to fight, Russian the way I did. I'm not saying, they're all beatable, but, who wants to go? If you're going to lose against the champion, I say, right? But anyway, I was, at the time, I was young, I was a little intimidated, and I didn't train to fight anybody of that size. I was training to fight all guys around my size. Those are the guys that I was training with. And my dad had saw what he was doing. He was in the corner, and I was just getting ready to sit out. And I was like, well, fuck, if I do this, I hope I don't get beat down. And then my dad chucks the towel in, and I'm like, I said afterward, I'm like, well, what's done is done. You know what I mean? Do I have any regrets about it? Yes. Do I wish I went further? Yes. If you're asking me.
No,
And I'm not saying by any means that, a fight is a fight. But hey,
but no,
you wish what you wish for, and anybody has a puncher's chance. That's all I would say.
Yeah, no, and a lot of fighters discuss, and I think you'll agree, just from your demeanor and your speaking, is 60, 80, 90, assign a percentage to the mind part of the game, So now if you're uncomfortable, and then the opponent kind of got under your skin a little bit, his hands are big, you saw his opponent, the results and stuff, you're carrying a lot of baggage getting in the ring,
He's almost 100 pounds heavier than me.
Yeah, he's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but he's not a fat shit.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's not like he was a piece of shit and he was running around. Like, he was 100 pounds heavier and he was highly mobile and could strike,
Yeah.
And so it was different. It wasn't like he was some blob, that I could just outpace,
Yeah. So definitely an interesting experience. And he went on to win the whole tournament. Now, there's the story that they got taken in a van to get paid, and that he was, supposed to get some cash, and that he got taken through an alley and met with men with machine guns in order to get paid. Did you have a similar experience? What was going on there?
I didn't make as much, so they paid me all in 100s.
Okay.
Again, what am I allowed to say for the IRS? Whatever. I'll say it was less than 10,000.
Yeah.
Because less than 10,000, I don't know what the taxable rules are, but I know in a casino, I think that's a significant number, less than 10,000, right? But it was hundreds, right? And I don't know. I wasn't personally around, obviously, when Ricardo was getting paid. I mean, by then I was probably already in my hotel room, and they were doing whatever they were doing. I mean, they're dealing with that. The thing about him, I want to say about his last fight, the final.
Mm-hmm.
The ref wanted so bad for the Russian to win. I mean, Ricardo had the guy behind him, and he was raining elbows down on the back of the guy's neck. The guy was not fighting back for a really long time. I mean, like more than 60 seconds. I mean, like in modern fight now, you take 4 or 5 shots and you are not fighting back.
Yeah,
instantly all across the board, whether it's one championship or UFC, they will stop the fight for the safety of the fighters. And Ricardo was raining down. He looked like a giant superhuman like this, just giant elbows like this, given everything he got. And the guy was just not fighting back, but he had so much muscle around his trapezius and his neck, you know what I mean? But I can imagine what he looked like the next day. He must have been like, on drugs and just like, icing it out and just in pain,
Yeah. That's Mikhail Ilyukhin, who to me, from those days, was one of those, like, he was a footlock specialist, a sambo specialist, a footlock specialist, and an aggressive finisher. So he was exciting to watch, and he met his match against that giant there. Well, any other impressions or stories there? Like, did you have a hard time? Like, obviously, you said the girls didn't tempt you and stuff like that. Did you see some of the other guys go down and fall for that? And what'd you see? Because
am I allowed to say who was committing infidelity to their relationships at the time? I don't know if anybody will see that. I mean, I will say this. I won't name any names, but I will say this. And there were 3 of them, so they don't know which one, right? And they were from a country in South America. So you have to pick up which one that is. Okay. And one of them was saying to me, he was basically, fucking the interpreter. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And not in the same time zone, basically. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There was a lot of, some of that stuff going on, and that was on the side, you know what I mean? But it bugged me because I was just recently newlywed, you know what I mean? Here I am thinking, not even a year with my wife. Now I'm off in another country. I didn't want to go to Japan because I didn't want to get involved with that shit. And then as soon as you put me into Russia, they're like, here you go. Yeah, one of the other fighters came back, and they were the woman was actually hard because she actually said Americans are weak.
Oh man.
I mean, we were sitting at the bar. The girls come paraded out. It was like watching one of those movies where, like in Bruce Lee, you know what I mean? When in Return of the Dragon, you know what I mean? When they parade all the girls out and stuff like that. They did that. They literally did that, you know, and you could sit there and like pick which one you wanted, you know?
Yeah, no. It's they're good. They consider themselves good hosts, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
So now let me ask you one more question about the fights from there, because I remember that tournament, and one of the Brazilian guys, Adelson Lima, he got knocked out twice. He got beat by Igor Vovchanchyn, something kind of like actually.
Did you see his nose?
Yeah,
his nose got broken.
Because in the video, that's all I got is the video, but it's a very good, interesting memory. Because first of all, you're talking about Igor Vovchanchyn, who would go on an all-time great, right? You're talking about an early, very aggressive, very ripped up version of Igor Vovchanchyn, and Igor knocks him out. The guy falls back and sort of convulses himself into a sitting position and confuses the ref. He's out, but the ref doesn't realize it. He thinks he's trying to get up, and Igor comes up and just kicks him in the face. At that point, there's some confusion. They go to the back and they reset the fight. What do you know about that?
What you were saying, I'm going to talk about that for a second, but what you were saying is very true, I think, about the Russian elite guys. Because going real quick, I'm going to get to that, but when Ricardo was in that final, in all his fights, but when he was in that final match, the referee guy kept looking at those big wigs that were in the crowd, like, what should I do? If you ever watch it, you'll see the ref looking there like, I could call it right now, but I'm not, because they didn't want the Russian guy to lose, you know what I mean? Sure. That's why they were letting all that punishment, happen to him, but eventually it had to happen. You know what I mean? They had to win. And so getting back to the other guy, I had forgotten his name. He didn't speak any English that I know of. Renzo was the only one who really spoke English at the time. So his nose got broken, right? But the thing about that is, when they were the whole sit up and everything, I think they were trying to give him a chance, because there was this ambiguity going on with the ref. The way the referees were, I mean, if you were not the guys they wanted to win, I don't think they really cared. They just called what they saw. But when it was somebody, who they thought was important, you know what I mean? Or maybe, and this is just a maybe, I will not say for sure, there's betting going on.
Yeah.
That so-and-so needs to last X number of minutes.
Sure.
Okay. I'm just going to put it that way. Now, when we get back to the locker room, that guy's nose is busted. I was sitting there watching him and I'm like, okay, I've seen my dad do this. And another guy had done it for him. But basically they shoved 2 pencils up the guy's nose. Right. Wow. And his nose is crooked. And what they do is they shove the 2 pencils up there and they go on 3, ready? 1, 2, you know what I mean? They don't do 3, they go 1, like that. And then the guy goes, and then, they pull the pencils out and then, his nose is straight. And then they're just forming it. Because he kept saying, he's like, I don't want to go to a Russian hospital.
So they treat him right there. Yeah. No,
so they straighten his nose right there with 2 pencils,
Did you avoided the Russian hospital yourself too?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. I got a hold of, at the gift shop, I got a hold of some hydrogen peroxide and just bandage up my knuckles or whatever. And that was it.
Fascinating stuff. So at this point, like you said, you're getting the experience. It's the Wild West. You're recently married. You're at a crossroads. It seems like you're probably at a crossroads and you had to decide whether you're going to continue in MMA or you're going to go off on your own path. Talk about that decision and when you decided to not do this again, because you had some success. You retired with a winning record. You were in there with world-class guys, for the time and stuff, and you hung in there, and there's no shame to what you did.
Yeah. There were already rumblings of guys complaining about the contracts that were going on and being treated like a piece of meat.
Okay.
Being treated like an asset,
Sure.
Even if you play football, you know what I'm talking about, right? So football players, college ball, same thing. They want to know your bench, your squat, your 40, your military press. You know what I mean? You got to tick all these boxes. They were doing a lot of the same things for the fighters in the early days, and then it switched over. Because Art Davies, I think they sold off the rights, and then it became Dana White and all those guys later on, right?
Sure. Like 2001. So
yeah,
Art Davie left, and then they went to a period where John Peretti was there.
Yeah, it was a transition. I had misgivings for those rumblings. Plus, I was working at the Kung Fu school, which was one of my overall goals. I'm a person, if I set a goal, I want to do it. I didn't want to just switch. I kept getting all these really cool offers. But it would have taken me away from the teacher that I was really trying to get to. If you're going to ask me if I have regrets, I do a lot.
Yeah,
you know
fair.
what I mean? I constantly, I'm 50. I constantly want, to fight and prove myself, and everyone's like, oh, you should go to the gym. I'll go to a gym and I'll roll and stuff like that. But I'm smart, at my age, I'm not going to sit there and try to give myself, life-threatening injuries. I just want to improve my skill and stuff like that. What I do again right now, if you put me against a guy my own age, within 5 years of my own age, I probably would do it.
That's cool.
What I mean?
And that's cool.
Give me 3 months. Give me 3 months to prepare. As long as he's within 5 years of me, then maybe. I'm still strong. I'm still pretty injury free. And if it's not MMA, but if someone steps in my wheelhouse and they're disrespectful, I'll immediately meet them out in the street. That's I'm still like that. Not because I'm trying to be brash. It's just that's what you have to do when you're a teacher. You have to protect what you have.
No, that's what I wanted to refer to is whatever you did, you walked away from MMA, but I've seen your YouTube channel, things like that. You are a lifelong you followed a martial arts path.
Right.
You went through that way. So, but let me ask you one. Do you remember one particular offer from back in those old days, like something money or a fight in particular or a location that they sent you something and you really thought about it, that you regret?
Immediately after David Rudman wanted to take me to a whole new group of fighters, and we were going to go to Kazakhstan.
Okay.
I would have gone home to California immediately, and we would have went to the next big thing, which was I don't know whether that whole event went down, but I had heard about that place at the time. I mean, apparently now it's not that bad, whatever, but at that time,
you had just fallen, and they were on their own, and it was poor at the time.
I meant what I said about guys, hanging, by their feet, because I always get this wrong. It's Lenin's body in the Temple of in the Red Square, right? It's Lenin's body, or is it Stalin's body? It's Lenin's body.
Yes.
Right. So, when you go in there, the guards are all around there, right? And they're got their rifles or whatever. They really mean it when they say no flash photography. They're not playing around, those guys, And I remember being I was once in Spain, as a kid, and they called them in Spain they called them the Guardia Civil, right? Mm-hmm. They're basically the civil guard, they're police. And I was bouncing a basketball, and you make a mistake and you bounce a basketball and it hits your foot and it rolls off. Well, it rolled off right in the direction of the Guardia Civil. And I forgot how old I was. I think I was like 12 at the time. And I was running to go get that ball, and I surprised the cop. And he turned around and he went, and he right at me, and I dove to the side. I was like, you can have the ball. You know what I mean? So that was always on my mind, and the way I was looking at these guards, I'm like, man, if you mess up here, and you don't show these guys respect, you're going to end up in the wrong spot, Yeah. Again, I was thinking about, being newly married, and everything else, calling me softy, but
No.
I didn't want to go away from that. There was a whole life being offered to me all around the world. And I'm thinking, why do I get married if I'm going to do that? You know what I mean? I should have, you know.
Yeah.
So I sat back and I let the world, you know, revolve around me. But I got to tell you, I still, and if anybody's finally listening in on this, you know, if you're going to ask, are there things that I know that could really contribute? I'm not saying that I'm a know-it-all. I'm just going to say everybody has something.
Sure.
Right. Every good boxing gym has at least one thing they're real good at. Right. So it would be a mistake for anyone to think, from my experience and from the experience that I've gained post those things, I know what works. I know what doesn't. Right. For me. And in those settings, you know, and I still have rolled and been practicing this whole time. I have a few things that I think I could offer, like, anyway, I you know.
No, I think it's noble. It's noble that you still, like I said, it's that martial arts thing where it's like, you know, you evolve from the competitor to where it's all piss and vinegar into that wanting to teach and hand it off. And you see yourself as part of a greater, you know, fabric, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I appreciate it. I saw that. That's why I reached out to you. We've been working on getting this interview done because, you know, I think you have a unique story, but you know, there are a lot of martial artists or traditional martial artists, you know, from that time who never tried it. And the bottom line is that's what separates you, is you actually tried it, and for the time, that's as edgy as you know, anything that you can see. It's much edgier then than it is now to be a mixed martial, you know, an fighter.
Well, I had guys in my hometown. You know how, like, I'm not comparing myself to Jesus, but obviously, you know, no one believes you in your own hometown. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Right. So there were guys in my hometown. I've known lifelong martial artists as well. They're like, you're going to get your ass kicked in there. You know, after I won, they didn't even want to talk to me. You know what I mean?
It's an amazing thing. Jealousies and things. But there were a lot of people that are making their money off something that's kind of fraudulent. You know, if you're not going to back it up, then there is that aspect. So that's why much respect to you, much respect for coming on. I know Chris wanted to be here, but he's at the Bare Knuckle show. I would have liked to have
met him, but yeah, I love watching Bare Knuckle because I think if I were to do anything, I would go to Bare Knuckle because I was used to fighting without the gloves. You know what I mean? And
sure.
You know, when you watch those events, they have a lot less lateral movement. You know, the Bare Knuckle guys, they just kind of like straight gun for each other. And then once they make that initial contact, you know, anybody that says
they back straight out.
They back straight out. You know, there's not as much lateral movement. There's, you know, they really just kind of charge and gun at each other. And it really kind of reminds me of, you know, the Filipinos have a saying, you know, like, if you look at another Filipino guy and you were to say, you know, like, you know, matigas, you know, you're saying, you know, like, who's the top guy? You know what I mean? Can you match me? You know, can you try me? You know, are you as good as me? Will you challenge with me? You know what I mean? And that's what those guys are, you know? And it makes a difference when you're popped with a good knuckle sandwich. You know, I'm not saying that the MMA gloves don't hurt, but
yeah, it's a different experience.
You're more likely to cut somebody with bare knuckles than you are with the gloves. That's what I'm, you know, absolutely so. But you're also more likely to spread your own knuckles. You know, in case the audience is listening, you know, the reason that professionals tape their knuckles is to keep the knuckles from spreading apart. You know, the reason boxers tape their knuckles, right? We tape them so that they keep them compacted together, so that over the years, all the pounding, you won't develop arthritis as much. Yes, it makes your fist more compact. Yes, it does all those other things. But one of the other things that you're trying to do is protect yourself, which is what a smart athlete would do, you know? And if you're bare knuckle, you don't have that, you know?
So as we close out here, let me ask you, so who's your favorite UFC fighter now? Do you still follow it, or over the years, who would be the one guy you would say to somebody, watch this guy?
I really like George St. Pierre, you know. I think he's a hard worker. Okay. I like a lot of them, you know.
St. Pierre's a good choice, you know, it's an all-time.
Yeah. I liked BJ Penn way back.
Sure.
I liked him. I like, I go for this, some of the older guys, like that. Those are the guys. I mean, BJ Penn, I do believe, had a background in karate.
Okay.
I do believe. I think he was one of the first guys who threw a front kick and knocked a guy out right straight up in the chin, just a straight up front kick,
Okay.
And then the world went, oh shit, traditional techniques still work. You know what I mean? Because prior to that, everyone was, oh, I'll take you down. I'll put you in an arm bar. You know what I mean? Oh, I'll take you down and I'll do this, whatever. Then here it comes along somebody, just whack. You know what I mean?
And it's over. Yeah.
And
So
it's over,
definitely.
I like Angela Lee, I really like her. I think she's a hard worker.
What do you think of the female fights?
I started to pay attention. I started to pay attention a lot with one championship in Asia, and I like the Team Lakai and all the Filipino guys,
Okay.
So shout out to those guys.
They're doing great things over there too. Because and I'm impressed because I'll be honest with you, when ONE FC came out, I said to myself, let's see if they got 20 shows in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we've already seen companies come and go so many times. And the fact is, they've had hundreds of shows. So I was way wrong, never more happy to be wrong. And they really tapped the market. Like you said, developed Filipino fighters,
and UFC guys are crossing over and going over there.
Brandon Vera, had been bought over, for example, a heavyweight. And there are other guys, Eddie Alvarez, who I know fights over there and things like that. But they really also worked on the Filipino market. They have ties to Burma and things like that. So it's definitely a great company. And, nice to see that you enjoy and watch that too, as well.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely good plug. We've been joined by Onassis Parungao, UFC 7 veteran, to talk about his MMA experience. He retires with a winning record, undefeated in the UFC, and that all-time tournament in Russia, the Russian Absolute One. Onassis, any final words before we sign off?
God bless, Michael. Thank you so much for contacting me and want to do this interview. And to any fans out there that bothered to listen all the way to the end, really appreciate it. And watch Michael's show. So
cool. Thank you very much, sir.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.